Alright, in my video from Monday, I made an introduction to the mechanics of the Burning Wheels, and now I want to give my thoughts on the game. I tried not to editorialize during the whole how-to video. Some comments and maybe some eye rolls might have slipped in, but now I would really let it all out. So oh, Mr. Max, tell us how you really feel about that game. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm not gonna re-explain the mechanics here because that was the point of the other video. So if you didn't watch the other video, and if you're not familiar with the mechanics of the burning wheel, you might be a bit lost. You could still get some values from that video though, so just watch it all just to make sure you're not missing out. And I need the view time. So first off, the Burning Wheel is a game that I really wanted to like. There's a lot of good ideas, a lot of good concept in that game. A lot of them are poorly executed, and there are just too many of them, like too many subsystems and too many systems that are similar but different. I've talked previously of how there's a virtue in RPG design to homogenize mechanics. And that is not something that's needed in video game design because all those rules are handled by a computer. But in RPG, people have to keep all those rules in their head. An example of this in Burning Wheel is the difference between helping someone and helping yourself with the fork mechanic. If you help someone else, you can them one dice. You can lend them one dice if your skill is 4 or less, and 2 dice if it's 5 or more. In the forks, it's similar, but you get 1 dice if the skill being fort is 6 or less, and 2 dice if it's 7 or more. Those two mechanics, they are very similar. So why just not make them the same? Just say that for help and for fork, you get 2 dice if your skill is 6 or more, or wherever you want to put that limit at. And just make it one thing. You can keep the acronym fork, that doesn't bother me. But now you can fork one of your own skill, or an ally can fork one of his skill into your test. Before I go into that, I want to address my biggest pet peeve with this game, something that is really irritating me, and it's the language used. It is written in such a pretentious manner. All the term used for those different mechanics. Like, why call the level of a skill the exponent? The exponent of a skill. Now, if I say to somebody like this that is used to RPGs, I say, oh, this is based on the exponent of your skill. I'm gonna get some blank stare. If I were to say, oh, this is based on the rank of your skill or the level of your skill, someone who played RPG before would immediately get it. Probably even somebody that would never play RPG. The term shade doesn't bother me as much, and that's about the term, because it's a novel enough concept that it could deserve its own name. But I think it's a concept that could have been cut off from the game completely. It would have made the system so much more manageable. Yes, you would lose some death, but in my opinion, it would be like a well worth it trade-off. And while we're at the language, the biggest one that is irritating for me is the term fort. And yes, some people mention that it should be pronounced forte, and I would agree with you. But I heard the creator of this game, Luke Crane, explicitly said that it was pronounced fort and that it came from French. And can you imagine how annoying this is for me, who speaks French as his first language? In French, we have a word spelled like that. It's pronounced fort. This word is the feminine version of the word fort, and fort means strong. So using the feminine form of that word would make no sense in that context. And if you wanted to use the French word for strength, it would be force, not fort, not fort, not fort. The word forte is sometimes used, as it is in French as it is in English, saying, oh, this is my forte, which means something that you're good at, like your area of expertise. It is your strength, but not in the sense of physical strength. And this is not how the game used this word. The game used it to mean basically constitution. If the author wanted to absolutely avoid using the same stat name as in D&D, he could have just gone with toughness. But trying to use a foreign word and missing like that just makes you sound like a pretentious asshole. Okay, so let's try to fix that game. The exponent are now called skill rank, and there's no more shades. Every dice showing a 4 or more give you 1 success. Fort is now called toughness. Okay, what else? Agility and speed. They need to be distinguished more. Let me look at that. Yeah. Or just make it 1 stat. Could just be 1 stat for both agility and speed. And then we can also get rid of the attributes. Or maybe we just like keep mortal wounds and reflex, the 2 that you don't roll, because having like attributes that some of them you roll, some of them you don't roll, makes no sense. And call them like derived stat. So now we get like the stats and some derived stats, which are calculated from the other stat. Steel can go into the stats, especially if we merge agility and steel and agility and speed. So now we would have will, power, agility, perception, toughness, and steel. There you go. 6 stat. No wonkiness there. The derived stat of health could probably be wrapped up into toughness. You don't need that much granularity. Sometimes, like, less is more. And yeah, people have to keep all the information in their head. Or otherwise, they would have to constantly refer back to the book, which is really harmful for a role-playing session. The physical tolerance grayscale. Well, already there's no more shades, so no more grayscale. And just call it wounds or injuries. And you can keep the level of injuries. Incidental, light, medium. Don't fucking call it midi. Severe, and traumatic. And even that is probably too much, because you also have like the less than superficial as well. Nah. Superficial should be like when you have no penalty. Then you got light, that give you +1 obstacle. Medium, +2 obstacle. Severe, +3. Dramatic, +4. And because you have the advantage and disadvantage mechanic that grants a die or raise the obstacle, stick with that. Don't have a different mechanics that removes dice. And speaking of increasing obstacle, can we just call the obstacle the target number? It's the number of success you need. I mean, obstacle is not a horrible name, but target number is what it's usually referred to in other games. That or the difficulty level. I can understand the urge to change a bunch of terms to make the games feel unique and different. But if your game is already fairly complex and you're gonna demand your player to keep all this information in their head, give them a break where you can. Oh, and because we got rid of a shade, we no longer have to keep track of the fate, persona, and deeds you spend on every stat and attributes. So that's another thing that is simplified. And while we're at it, the experience for those stats, attribute, and skill, I like the idea of keeping track of experience for each one of them individually, having them get better with use, but like make a certain number of easy test and difficult test and challenging test, and consulting a chart of what's constitute an easy, difficult, or challenging test, and another chart to know how many of each you need depending on the level of your rank. That is too much. Let's do this. You gain experience points for every test you make with a skill. And the experience is gained per skill. The number of experience points you gain is equal to the obstacle, or the target number of difficulty level, if we change the name, of the test. So if you do the test and you need 5 success to win, you're gonna gain 5 experience points. Pass or fail, doesn't matter. Then when you get 10 times the current level of your skill, you can raise it by 1. That does mean that you could do only easy tests, but you would need to do much more of them to level up than if you challenge yourself. It might not be as deep or as realistic, but it's much easier to handle. The bits part is one that I like quite a bit. Like defining your character with belief, instinct, and traits, that's fine. Would I change something from it? Maybe for the belief and instinct, I would allow the players to just get 2. Getting 3 is an advantage, but if a player just have a hard time coming up with 3, well, let him have 2, that's fine. You can get another one later on. And maybe for the trait, I would say that you take 1 of each type. So you got 1 character trait, 1 dice trait, and 1 column trait. But overall, this is a strong part of the game. What I'm not such a fan of is the Artar and Epiphanies. I'm not a big fan of metacurrency that allow you to reroll dice or stack the odds in your favor. And now there are 3 of them that all do slightly different things. I also dislike the rewards being granted at the end of the session by committee, like the whole table voting on it. My table is not a democracy. So what do we do with that? We could do without. You don't need a reward to roleplay your character, And instinct gives you an advantage in themselves. They are kind of like a fail safe. So you don't have to state every time that you pick up your roll back up at the end of the fight because you wrote it as an instinct. The traits, the column and the dice traits, they also give you bonus in themselves. The belief don't have bonus in themselves, but it would be easy to say like, oh, if you act in accordance to one of your belief, add 1 die to your roll. And if we leave the restriction of 1 dice, no matter how much advantage you got, you could say add 2 dice to your roll. It could be good to remove this restriction of only 1 dice per advantage, since there's no restriction on difficulty level increase. Maybe if we want to put a restriction, just say that you cannot have more advantage dice than what the skill is granting you. If we do want to keep a metacurrency, let's just keep 1. And let's say do 1 or 2 things. 2 things if one of them is to have a chance not die from a mortal wound. Because this is kind of a cool greater fate mechanic. Now for the combat. This is going to be a tough one. Just resolving a fight with a single opposed roll, that doesn't feel quite satisfying. But the other method presented, the fight with the big chart and the scripted action and the 55-page for damage resolution, that's too much. There's 35 action you can choose from at every action of every volley. Those action here, 35 of them, count them. Maybe we could cut that a bit. And of course, not all of those 35 action you really have to consider, because if you're not a magic user, you can just skip over the magic action. But when you look at that sheet, it can be very intimidating. Also, when you choose what kind of a character you're gonna make, you kind of have to understand what you could do in a fight. So you have to still read and understood to some extent all those actions. I would also cut the vying for position before each round. That should be like maybe part of the action that you can pick for a volley. Of course, you would need to make room for it because we want to cut them. So maybe instead of making two different actions as a strike and a great strike, make one with an option. Like if you spend two actions in it and you only resolve it on the second action, then you do a great strike instead of a strike. So the action you could have like strike, a block, a dodge, a move, a shoot, a cast a spell, a wait, and maybe intimidate. So that's 8. And maybe we could go to 10. It's less granular, but it's much more playable. And all those little details of like a feint and a block and strike and a beat, they are all included in those other actions as narrative flavor. If you do a strike, it's not a single like sword swing. It does include some feint and footwork. I'm trying not to change the identity of the game too much, so I'm trying to figure out a way to preserve the feel of the game. Torchbearer, which is based on the Burning Wheel, does it in a 4 action. You got attack, defend, feint, and maneuver. And the chart just tell you if the roll are independent, versus, or if no roll is done. One day I'll make a video about Torchbearer. Because like in the Burning Wheel, this is the chart to resolve your action. Like, oh, if you did a avoid and the opponent did a beat, then you have to test your speed versus his skill. Imagine if you run a combat like that. That's every action, every volley, for every character involved, for every pair of character involved. That's insane. So that's something that really need to be cut down. For the damage resolution, I think there's too many steps. So once you made your hit, once you know that you landed a blow on the opponent, now the opponent determined the location where the blow landed. Then you can spend additional success to change that location. Then you do incidental damage. But then you can spend additional success to raise, to mark, or superb damage. And the cost is based on your weapon. Then the opponent can do a armor roll versus the penetration rating of your weapon. Then the opponent has to check if his armor has been damaged. So that's like 7 steps after the hit has been landed. Like it doesn't even count like the step to land the hit. Once you know that, oh, okay, I hit you, I landed the blow, 7 more steps. And even those steps have like sub-step, like to determine the penetration value of the weapon. Simplifying that without changing the feel too much is a bit challenging. I say we could get rid of the hit location and make the armor a little more abstracted. Now you don't have to really bother about what kind of armor you have on each part of the body, just like a whole thing together. And we could also take out the armor roll and armor penetration. That would change the feel quite a bit. So maybe we keep the penetration factor and of the weapon, but we sacrifice the modification from action and power of the character. The damage to armor, since we don't have shade anymore, it's much simpler. You roll a 1 or more 1, and your armor lose a die. So we can keep that. Or we can get rid of it. Doesn't really matter. Then the same kind of cleanup can be done for the Duel of Wits and the range and cover mechanic. And if those 3 mechanics could be homogenized, that would be the best. This is also something that Torchbearer did. Other thing I didn't mention in the other video because it was beyond the scope was character creation. And there's some wonkiness in it, but that doesn't bother me too much because character creation, you can just follow along with the book and you don't have to worry about preserving the pacing of the game because it's something that's kind of done out of game if you want. And I quite like the life path system. Yeah, there's a few things that could be cleaned up and presented better, but overall, that's a thumbs up for me. So, I think this is gonna be it for the video. I wanted to make it to give you an idea of where I come from when I look at a game and when I consider its design. And of course, the modification I propose here are from the top of my head mostly, and I haven't tested them or anything, and I wouldn't suggest that you homebrew your game with those. But if I was working on the design of that game, I would start there. Burning Wheel has a lot of good concept and good mechanics as well, but there's just too much of it, and there's too many subsystems, and at some point, you have to pick and choose what is really important, and you have to be willing to kill your darlings. I think this game is a very good case study in game design because of that. And I know there are a lot of people who like this game a lot, and that's fine, and I can see why. Like I said, I really wanted to like that game, and there's a lot of parts of that game that I like quite a lot. I just think it's a bit unwieldy. Anyway, I hope you found something useful or entertaining in this video. I'm recording in the middle of the night. I've been pretty busy lately, so I record when I can. Oh, and don't miss tomorrow, Saturday, I'll have a live stream 2000 EDT, so 8 p.m. Eastern Time, where I'll have a talk with Viktor Gorchev about his product, his creative process, his and about game design philosophy. So thank you for watching. Take care and have a good day.